young Nick Lake from the Byron Solar Train, but he's also co-founder of Energy Lab Sydney. So for anyone thinking about starting up a business in this space, whether it's ethics on who you're going to crash into, your groceries or the kangaroos, this is a presentation to watch. And I'm glad that the Courier Mail's here too, because they are the respected news here in Queensland. I was going to knock the mic out of your hand before and say, put that down, but that's been done. And straight after Nick, we've got the whys and wherefores of EVs for the average person. Does it suit me? So without further ado, we'll welcome young Byron Solar Train and Energy Lab Sydney, Mr. Nick Lake. Please make him welcome. Oh.
Morning, thanks. Thank you. Here to talk about two topics today. Firstly, a fantastic project I was involved in, the world's first solar train, which was a conversion of a 1949 heritage train from diesel to electric drive, powered by solar. And then secondly, my main work now is Energy Lab. So we, at Energy Lab, are a national organisation that are out to support clean tech entrepreneurs. So encouraging young engineers and young entrepreneurs to see clean tech as an industry that they might want to put their effort into and hopefully find some success in. Well, firstly, I'll run through the Solar Train project. It was a really fantastic project. It was an interesting opportunity. On the north side of Byron Bay, there's a new resort called Elements Resort, and that's owned by a Brisbane fellow, Brian Flannery, who had made his money in coal and got to know through coal mining the railway networks and fell in love with railway. And in Byron Bay, there's a railway line that's run from Casino up to Murwillumbah that closed about 14 years ago. So there's this disused railway line running past his new resort. And Brian lobbied over a number of years, state government of New South Wales, and was able to get a lease over that railway section. So it's about a 3.5 kilometre run. And the locals, though, being a green council and whatnot, didn't want a diesel train running down through town. So we converted 1949 train, you can see in the photo there, over to solar drive. So I'll run through the technology that we used and who the team was and how we pulled that off. It's been up and running now for a year, really well attended. It runs around 12 trips a day, and on the festival weekends even more, so every hour there's a run. And if you get a chance to go down and have a ride, it's great fun. It's a very gentle, serene ride through the waterlands, wetlands there, the back of Byron, Belongil area, just on the north side. So that's myself. In the middle there's the project manager, Jeremy Holmes. He oversaw the whole project. And on the left is Brett. Brett Sutherland's from Newcastle. He runs a business, El Mofo, which is a great electric conversion business. They do all sorts of exotic conversions, including race cars. His first conversion, that was interesting. He took a DeLorean from Back to the Future and electrified that, and it's a fantastic car. Get around in. He screams around Newcastle in that still now. Can I flick through? Oh, sorry, got it. Thanks. Oh. Technologies challenge. Sorry. So the next slides are talking about, here we go, the components that we had to use. So when we first assessed this challenge, engineering challenge, we've got a old train, 70 tonnes of weight, which we have to accelerate up to just a general 50 kilometres an hour, but still it's a lot of weight to move. So we had to assess what engines we'd need to do that. And in the design, we went through with a twin Parker motors. They're from the US, and a battery pack of 77 kilowatt hours, so similar to a Tesla. And then solar energy, we scanned the market. We were firstly looking at putting a canopy over the roof of the train, and that was going to change the aesthetics of a beautiful old heritage train. So we quickly steered away from that. And there was a new product on the market that's been developed by Dr. Shi, who's well known in Australia as the founder of Suntech. So he went through the University of New South Wales, got his knowledge at the solar school there under Martin Green, and then went off and set Suntech, and it was at one point the richest man in China in the solar boom 10 years ago. But his new company, Sunman, had developed this fantastic product. So it's a silicon cell, so we're getting the full efficiency of a normal solar silicon cell, not a thin film product. And it has a degree of flexibility because instead of a glass encapsulation, it's got a polycarbonate shell. So as you'll see in one of the later photos, it gave it a nice little curve, and we could follow the form of that roof line and retain the heritage value of the train. Additionally to the 6.5 kilowatts of solar we got on the roof of the train, we needed more energy than that to move it. So we've put a 30 kilowatt array on the main platform at the northern end of the run. And when the train is at that end, it's usually there for 20 minutes or so. We have twin Kiba 22 kilowatt hour chargers. So we can get 44 kilowatts of charge into the train when it's in platform at that end. So more than enough. We're finding though the train is getting only around 4 to 5 kilowatt hours per run each direction. So with the onboard charging and the solar panels on the train, we only need to top up at the main platform every third run or so. Even then, you know, that's being generous for keeping those batteries well charged. So here's the actual motors. So another big part of the challenge was the twin Parker motors there. We need to put them through a new gearbox. So we had to engineer a whole gearbox, and that was done in Newcastle. The actual manufacturing was overseas in the US, but the engineering was all done by the Elmofo guys in Newcastle here. So that whole group of components there then slotted into a skid, which is coming up here. Oop. There we go. So then we've got the traction inverters. So we had to take the 400 volt DC from the batteries and then convert that into the AC for the permanent magnet AC motors that we ran. So that required some pretty heavy gear, the Reinhardts, which came over from Europe. It was a real international assembly of parts. It was quite an interesting process to go through to find the right components for such a bespoke project that hadn't been done before, this kind of assembly of gear. The batteries, though, were made here in Australia in Newcastle. So Brett's well known for his batteries, Elmofo guys. He's done that through his race cars. He's, a few years back, set up a radical race car and took on petrol cars. And by the third or fourth round, he was starting to win races. And the CAMS officials weren't too keen on that. They didn't want to have their petrol cars shown up. So they actually then extended the races to basically block him from competing. So instead of being a 15-lap race, they made them 25 and he was done. So he just couldn't carry the batteries for that. But it certainly proved his point that the electric cars were super competitive and outperformed the petrol cars back then. He's now actually working on another car, you know, the little Aussie race cars, which I think they run on the Super V8 program. And he's just under development. They'll be having that on the track next year. So look out for that. It should be a rocket. But these are his batteries. He uses a Kokum cell from Korea, which is one of the premium lithium-ion cell manufacturers in the world. Fantastic, reliable product there. Battery management system, super critical component to make sure those batteries are humming well. The batteries are actually in an oil bath, so they are cooled in the oil. But the battery management system is done in Australia, the Batrium product. A great engineer has been working with CSIRO. Jaron, I think Jaron's here this weekend actually. But yeah, fantastic. You can see cell by cell, and over the year that it's been running, we've had a couple of lazy cells which were swapped out, and we can see it all really clearly on the performance data we get from the Batrium system. Here's the charging array. So it's a great aerial view there of the 30 kilowatts on the main platform, and then the 6.5 kilowatts spread along the length of the two carriages. And then, as I was saying before, we've got those twin 22 kilowatt chargers that top it up when it's in that platform end. It's a pretty simple process. The driver just jumps out of the driver's seat and down on the ground. There's two hose reels of charge cord. They just plug them in. While it's there for 20 minutes, it'll get well topped up. And yeah, some of the challenges was how to fit all this into the train and make it a simple installation. We didn't want to affect the train, the actual owner of the train. So the train is also leased from the Lismore Heritage Railway Museum. So they didn't want the train dramatically changed. So we built this, the yellow metal box there basically is the skid. So all the components fitted within there, and then it was forklifted up and bolted into where the old motor was and gearbox. So really neat solution. The batteries, and you can see the red gearbox and the motors. The batteries tucked in up the front end of that. So yeah, once the train's running, you don't even notice that. It's tucked up nicely under the carriage. And then integrating the control gear into the driver's compartment was the final challenge. It's a very rudimentary old levers, forward and reverse on the old train. We had to get the modern dials in, control gear, so you can see the half circular dial down the lower right. That's a Motec gauge. That gives fantastic information about the performance of the train, but also the temperature of each of the components. So there's good warning signals there. So we've slotted that in neatly. The drivers have all been trained. There's a fair bit new knowledge to take on board, how they manage these systems. But it's all been done very well. They've had no major breakdowns, no issues. At times, the design has been quite useful. We ran a twin engine design, so we've had the odd failing of a component, but because we've had the two drive lines, we've been able to keep the train running on electric and haven't had to go back to diesel. There was twin diesel motors on the train, so one of the old diesels is still there, and it gets started every week just to turn it over, but it hasn't had to run on the diesel, which is great after 12 months of operation. So the drivers have really taken to this project, actually. They've loved it, and the feedback from the community, most importantly, has been terrific. And it's actually a real solution for the local transport issues there in Byron Bay. If you've ever tried to get in Byron on a weekend, coming in from the north side, it's just a gridlock traffic jam. It can be 3 or 4 kilometres long out the north side there. So this is a park and ride solution. It's in the Arts Industrial Estate, so you can just swing off. There's a Bayshore Drive, turn off there, park your car and jump on the train. It's only $3 ride into town. Means you don't have to get parking in Byron, which is also a bit of a nightmare at times on the weekend. So it's a great public transport solution. It's been so well loved by a lot of the residents. There's hope that it might move out to Mullumbimby. The current owner invested a lot of money, though, into upgrading the tracks, so they'll need some government investment to be able to upgrade that old railway line. So yet to be seen whether that'll happen in the future, but it'd be great if it could, because it's a great example of reuse of an old railway carriage, modernising it, and the tourists are flocking to it. It's a great, well-used tourist attraction now. Then over to something completely different. This is what my main work involves now, which is Energy Lab. So we're Australia's largest accelerator of clean tech companies. We've got 28 companies in our program right now. And what we're all about is helping the revolution to clean energy. Electric vehicles are a big part of the mix in that. So we've, over the last 2 years, been running a series of events. And those events help us bring people, bring awareness up on this topic, bring people into the topic, have vibrant discussions around what's going on in clean tech. And then those young entrepreneurs and engineers can see the opportunities and hopefully come up with the business ideas of the future that we need. Because it's not going to be one or two, that we need thousands of successful businesses to make this transition. So we've seen these range of areas, the solar generation, wind generation, some areas, but then there's the storage, the distribution of the energy, how we're going to work with the digitalisation of energy, so the smart home monitoring, new billing systems perhaps, bioenergy, especially in Queensland, using agricultural waste. How do we create biofuels for the future? There's still going to be a need for liquid fuels, particularly in aviation perhaps, so there's great opportunities in that area for Queensland. Looking at hydrogen economy too, more and more talk of hydrogen now that renewable energy has come down so much. I was at a conference in LA recently where there was a European speaker talking about taking cheap energy out of Chile from solar, where it's 2 cents a kilowatt hour, converting that into hydrogen and packaging in ammonia and shipping ammonia to Europe, and then unpackaging it back into hydrogen for a hydrogen economy in Europe. So there's a great opportunity for Australia to do the same here with Japan and Korea, looking at going full tilt on hydrogen. We've got the port facilities in Queensland, so these sort of large-scale businesses is something we might not see through the Energy Lab cohort, but we like to get that discussion happening, and the government partners we've got on board have been fantastic collaborators on those discussions. So this is our business model, if you like. We run these events, create the conversations. We then run hackathons. We've actually got one live at the moment over in Fortitude Valley. So there's a bunch of 28 people who have come in to spend their weekend hacking an idea. So we had 3 presentations yesterday from Energy Queensland and Sunverge and other groups who presented their problems, what they're trying to challenge and what their challenges are, and what they're trying to solve. So then the 28 participants are there now trying to come up with a business idea. This afternoon we'll have a Shark Tanks type judging panel, and we'll pick a winner, and then they'll get an opportunity to join our accelerator program where we can help them develop that business idea further. Our main thing though is our accelerator program. A companies that get involved with us there will receive 50,000 venture capital if they choose to take that. We also give them a dedicated workshop series where they can broaden their business skills, so legal, accounting, marketing, sales. We often find they're great on the technology but might lack some of those broader business skills, so we can help them give that skill set. We can also help find collaborators for them if they don't have within their current team the right skill set. There might be others in our group that could join and make that a successful business by collaboration. Fantastic mentor network. We've got over 250 mentors nationally. Very high caliber people who are giving their time freely to help these young businesses thrive. So that's our main program, and as I said, 28 companies. We've got 4 in Brisbane currently going through the program. We're located in Eagle Street in the Clean Energy Finance Corporation's offices, and we tend to run most of our events down at the precinct at the Brisbane River City Lab space there in Fortitude Valley. But please come and join in. We'd love to see you at some of our events. If you've got any good ideas, bring them along. There's so many opportunities to share and create those businesses of the future, which is what we need to crack this. Just wrap up saying thanks to some of our sponsors. We've got Origin Energy as our key corporate sponsor. We also have a range of the state governments who've given us funding or space. And then the university partnerships are critical to us. So we work very closely with QUT here, UTS in Sydney. We're actually on their campus, Melbourne University in Melbourne. And we're also reaching out to Adelaide and Perth next year, working with Curtin and Adelaide universities. Here's our companies. As far as the electric vehicle space goes, Ride Green is an electric scooter hire business. Great guys there. They're just launching in Melbourne, taking on the likes of like Lime from the US, where they've got scooters on the streets of LA and further. Sunshine Cycles is actually a Byron Bay business. He's got a completely off-grid solar-powered pod with 10 rental bikes in there. Beautiful vintage motorcycle sort of style electric bikes. Going very well. Everty is a plug share type business. So you've got an electric car, you're looking for a place to plug in. You can use people's home chargers. So as a homeowner with a charger, you can register and you'll be able to monetize that investment so people can come and use your space, a bit like Airbnb of electric car chargers. You can get a return on your money for that. So some really interesting ideas coming through. We've got 4 or 5 electric vehicles in our 28 companies at the moment. And yeah, looking for more. So I'll be around today. Please come and say hi if you've got any ideas you want to discuss, or please come along to an event. Hope to see you soon. Thanks.
Well, I guess a number of you, come on in, there's plenty of seats. I guess a number of you are now considering EVs and purchases, which is fantastic. And our next speaker is a paramedic speaking about the dangers of driving in an autonomous vehicle. There's a few more chairs here. Don't be shy. There's one at the front, 3 over there, 2 at the back there. Can everyone just shimmy over a bit just so we can fit a few more people in? Don't get overly familiar. You've got a handbag. Your husband's coming. Nice, nice. So for those of you who are trying to make a decision, an informed decision, and pretty much we had this conversation 500 times yesterday, partly it's about eliminating what you don't want to wind up with what's left that you do want. But John's taken that as a personal journey. So to cover the whys and the wherefores of EVs for the average person, does it suit? Please welcome John Murray.
Okay, well look, yes, I've worked most of my career as a paramedic, so what do I know about electric cars? Probably not a lot, but I've driven one for the last 3.5 years. It's the only car that we own, and we've got about 70,000 kilometres on it without a single problem. So why am I talking today? Well, I'm very keen just to talk to normal folk like me about how we find this vehicle and to dispel some of the myths around it. So I've decided just to look at the frequently asked questions. So I'm just going to try and answer the 4 main questions we get asked all the time. But before I start, I'd like to bring up this quote from Henry Ford. You know, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. And one of the problems I find when people are asking about electric cars is they ask questions based on their experiences with an internal combustion engine. And I think that those questions they ask are very sensible, but they're not necessarily the right questions. So these are the 4 most common questions any electric vehicle owner will get asked. What is the range? What does it cost? How long does it take to charge? And how long will the battery last? Okay. Good questions, not necessarily the right questions from my experience. So I'm going to look at the first two of those questions firstly. What is the range? Well, the first thing I'd like to say is that range is a function of battery capacity, and battery capacity is a function of cost. So the range of electric vehicles is not limited by technology at all these days. You can build an electric car to go as far as an internal combustion car, and it'll do what an internal combustion car can do and a lot more. Cost is the limiting factor. Here are 4 electric cars, all have a range of around 500 kilometres or more. All of them, except for the Tesla Model 3 there in the bottom right-hand corner, will cost you over $100,000, however. So if we look at this is from Bloomberg New Energy Finance. If we look at the factor that makes electric cars so dear at the moment, it's the battery pack. So I bought my car in 2015. Half the cost of that car would have been the battery. When you look at the price reduction of lithium-ion battery packs, they're falling at about 16% per annum, 16% per year. So that means I can go and buy the same car now for the same price with almost, at least 50% more range, simply because the cost reductions. So that's a significant thing to appreciate. And what it means is that by the middle of 2024, 2025, an electric car will be cheaper to buy than an internal combustion engine car of the same, basically a comparable internal combustion engine car. The electric car is intrinsically simpler and cheaper to build. There are far fewer moving parts, and they're going to, with economies of scale, they're going to become much cheaper than a normal internal combustion engine car. And as a result, manufacturers won't make them anymore. They know this is happening. That's why there's so much energy and effort going into develop their knowledge and so forth of electric vehicles. If we have a look at this graph, it shows the prices of batteries per kilowatt hour. And if we go back to 2010 there, you can see it was going to cost about $1,000 per kilowatt hour for to produce the batteries for EVs or home storage or whatever. If you look at 2018, so in a mere 8 years, the cost of those batteries has declined to be only 20% of what it was. A huge cost decline, and that's what's starting to bring on the electric car shift that's going on across the world at the moment. Some of you might know this author, Tony Seba. He's written a couple of pretty interesting books. One's called Solar Trillions. This other one, Clean Disruption of Energy and Transport. And he states that at $100 per kilowatt hour, it's all over for the internal combustion engine. It will not make any sense to build an internal combustion engine car once battery prices hit that. And by those predictions, it's looking like happening around 2024, 2025. Another fellow, Ramez Naam, you can see his lectures on YouTube. I'd highly recommend you go and have a look at those. He predicts that change is going to come even sooner. And he says that all his predictions, and he's fairly bullish in his predictions about this sort of stuff, whether it be solar panels and the solar industry or batteries, he said all his predictions have been shown to be too conservative. So he thinks the change can come as early as 2020. That is, the price of the battery getting cheaper. The price of the battery hitting 100 kilowatt hours per, $100 per kilowatt hour, excuse me. So this chart here just looks at the correlation between the Australian cost of the current electric vehicles available in Australia and their range. And so we can see quite clearly there's a fairly obvious correlation between the two. Range is a factor of cost, not so much of technology. But I'd like to just bring another factor into the play. You know, I said earlier on, we always evaluating the electric car by the criteria that we've adopted in our brains from many decades of use of an internal combustion engine. People ask, what is the range? That's a sensible question. But what is enough range, I think, is the other part of the question. Sorry, I've just skipped ahead a little bit there. I'd just like to highlight some of the newer cars in Australia as of next year. So we've got 3 there. And just to reiterate the fact that costs are falling remarkably, that Hyundai Kona, of which there's one on display out here, the people out here are telling me it's going to cost around $53,000. It's got a range of 480 kilometres. That'll take you up north of Bundaberg. It'll take you down into, you know, well down into New South Wales. That's a bigger range than what I've had in some of my old Subarus and so forth. So for $53,000, you get a car that's got all the abilities of an internal combustion engine car, but is, you know, about 20% running costs are about 20% that of an internal combustion engine car. So this is just represents how quickly this change is coming about. Just coming back to the factor of what range is needed, we know that Australian motorists travel around 39 kilometres a day. The median average would actually be less than that. And on that chart there, I've just put a red line along the bottom to show that for what most of us do, most of the time, the electric car, every electric car available in Australia will be able to do that now. We tend to buy cars with the notion of paying a lot of extra money in fuel and maintenance for the exception of you know, needing 500 kilometre range every once or twice every year. If I wanted to drive to Noosa or Coolangatta or Toowoomba, still every electric car available in Australia will do that now. And you know, I might want to do that 3 or 4 times a year. As I say, we've had our car for 3.5 years. Range hasn't been a problem. If I want to drive up to those places and return without charging, then a couple of the lower range cars at the moment won't do that. But of course, we've now got some pretty impressive charging infrastructure around Queensland in particular, which means I can I can plug the car in for an hour, take some free electricity, and have lunch while I'm doing that, and head home. So so I don't find the car at all limiting in any way. So technologically, range is not an issue. And I'd say when people are asking what, you know, they want to know what range an electric car does, I'd also ask that they counterbalance that with what is the need for most of your driving. Just a couple of quotes from the literature there. What the detractors and critics of electric vehicles have been saying for years is true. The electric vehicle is not for everybody. But it will meet the needs of 90% of the population, even now with modern technology. This other fellow, Carl Hugh, who is an automotive engineer, serendipitously had the use of an electric car. He never wanted to give it up. He found it just so remarkable in how it drove and its cheapness in maintenance and so forth. He says we could be using short range, high usage electric cars and long range, low usage internal combustion engine cars. And I think for any family that's got 2 cars, particularly if you live in an urban area, I just can't see the need that or the reason why one of those cars would not be electric, granted the very, very cheap running costs of them. So hopefully I've addressed range a little bit. How long does it take to charge is the other very, very common question that we get. And here's the answer. If I asked you how long it took your phone to charge, most people won't be able to tell me. They'll say, oh, it's about 2 hours, it might be 3 hours, but they don't know. And I can't tell you how long it takes my electric car to charge. Why is that? Because I'm sleeping. I'm doing something else. It doesn't take me any time at all. People say it's an advantage to go to a gas station and spend money that you spent time earning to charge your car, to fuel your car. It doesn't seem to make any sense, to me at least. I mean, if I filled my internal combustion engine car, cost me $90, that's 2 hours of work I've had to do to pay for that. So that it's not just 15 minutes at the service station, it's actually 15 minutes and 2 hours to be able to fuel that car. The ability to fuel an internal combustion engine car rapidly only addresses the problem of the internal combustion engine, and that is not being able to charge it at home. Okay, so one of the things about having an electric car is it's plugged in every night, it's fully charged every morning, and it takes no time. I will spend less time fueling or fueling my car than people with internal combustion engines will fueling their car. So again, I'd just like to challenge the question. I don't think the question is how long it should take to charge, but probably how quickly can you charge it. You see, if we look at charging, if you buy yourself a new electric car, you'll all get what we would call a level 1 charger. It plugs into any 240 volt plug, okay? So 90% or more of people's charging is done through a similar device, whether you wire it into your house, which a lot of people do, just to take advantage of off-peak electricity. But 90% or more of your charging is done that way. There's what we call level 2 charging. So many of you may have well seen now around some shopping centres. This is Carindale Shopping Centre, where businesses are installing what we call level 2 chargers. There's a higher power through that, so it'll charge the car more quickly. And they're installing these and providing free charging for people simply to bring business in. We have changed our shopping centre now because we will go to Chermside Shopping Centre, which offers free car charging, and of course we always get a car park as well, because that's what a lot of businesses are doing in attracting custom. Those photos are just a couple of EVs charging at Carindale Shopping Centre. And then we've got what we call level 3 DC fast charging. So this is the sort of charging that people would need, not most of the time. You'll only do probably 1-2% of your charging via these high energy outputs. But this is where these charging points are located along the main highways. Queensland has about 18 or 20 of them now, scattered along the highways. And they're the Tesla ones. That's down at Port Macquarie. I'm just coming back to the question, how long does it take to charge? As I said, I think the question is probably how quickly can it charge? So, you know, I know my car will charge it to about 120 kilometres in an hour on a fast charger. I can plug it in. Within an hour, I've got another 120 kilometres of range. If you look at the Teslas, this is a Tesla charging on a fast charger. It can get 428 kilometres of range in an hour. So that's just the amount, that's the time it takes to have your lunch, basically. So I think the question should not be how quickly or how fast does it charge, but how quickly can it charge. Should not be how long does it take to charge, but how quickly can it charge. Or a better way to look at it is how many kilometres per hour can a car charge at. So I think because most of the time we're charging through a slow charger, but it's while we're doing something else, just like your mobile phone. And if we look around Queensland or Australia, these are all the high-powered level 3 fast charging stations currently already available around the nation. You can take an electric car from here to Cairns or here to Sydney already. And if you look at the level 2 chargers, there are quite a few of those around as well. I'll skip over that. Last question, how long will the battery last? I think this is a really, really good question. That was certainly a concern of mine, and if I go and buy another electric car, which I'm anticipating doing in the next year or two, it'll certainly be another question I'll ask. One of the things about the lithium-ion batteries is that they are extremely resilient. They're more resilient, I think, than any other battery ever manufactured. But again, people are coming from their experiences of lead-acid batteries or NiCad batteries, and from that, we have this notion that batteries aren't that resilient. Lithium-ion batteries, all manufacturers now, if you buy a car, they will warranty the battery for at least 8 years. So the common thing is that the battery, yes, it will diminish by 1 to 3% per year in its ability to hold charge, but they warranty those batteries for to be able to have 70% of their state of charge after 8 years. Okay, so some of them with unlimited kilometres. If you buy a Tesla, they'll say, I don't care how far you go, that battery will still be viable after 8 years. We'll warranty it for 8 years. The biggest factor with batteries is heat. So one of the things I look at is making sure the battery in whatever car I buy has active cooling, is fluid cooled or cooled through the air conditioning systems. And that's operational heat, charging heat, and even the heat, ambient heat. So when you're storing a car, an EV, if it's stored in 40-degree heat, that will slightly diminish the battery compared to storing it in 20-degree heat or 10-degree ambient temperatures. But certainly from my perspective, we've got 70,000 kilometres on our car so far, and I have not noticed a single issue with the range of the car and therefore the state of charge of the battery. It's performing as well now as what it did 3.5 years ago when we bought it. So look, I could talk. I guess the other point to make is, well, even if I do need to change the battery in 8 years or 10 years, so what? With the falling costs of batteries, I'm going to get a battery which is going to be cheaper and have a much greater capacity and so forth in any case. And there's not much other wear and tear components on the car, apart from tyres. They're pretty good. So I tend to think that we should be perhaps challenging the assumptions and inadequacies of the internal combustion engine as much as the issues with the electric car. If we were to look at what questions we would ask about the internal combustion engine car, what is it like living with fossil fuel lock-in? Well, it's going to cost you 500% more to run that car than it will an electric car. Do you experience any maintenance anxiety? I know when I've had an old internal combustion engine car, I would often experience maintenance anxiety, going to the dealer to have it serviced, or in fact maintenance anger. Can you fuel it at home? Can you fuel it free from the sun? How much time does it take for you to fuel it each week? What is its risk of fire? Far more than with an electric car. So what happens if you run out of petrol? What's the cost of servicing? Does it pollute, and if so, how much? Most people won't be able to tell you because it's not an issue for them. And is it harmful to your health? Yes, there's a lot of evidence coming out these days to show how harmful dealing with fuel and emissions are, not just particularly with diesel particulate emissions and so forth. So look, thank you for the opportunity to share some of my experience. I've written a little book about it, which you can download on iTunes, or you can send me an email and I'll send you a PDF. And I've got some flyers here, so if you want to take some of those and send us an email, I'm happy to share that with you. So thank you.
Big hand, ladies and gentlemen.